My family mocked me for becoming a janitor instead of a lawyer, until they walked into the office building where I owned the top floor. The first time I understood my family had already judged me, I was standing in a glass office tower downtown with my coat still on and my phone still in my hand. I had come because someone said there was a misunderstanding. That word always sounded harmless until my family used it. In our house, a misunderstanding meant the decision had already been made, and they were only inviting me over so I could apologize for something I had not done. My cousin Adrian was there before me. That should have warned me. Adrian had always been better at arriving early, sitting close to the most important person in the room, and making the first version of the story sound like the only version that mattered. My mother would not look directly at me. My father had his hands folded like he was chairing a meeting. Around them were the people who had watched me grow up, people who had eaten birthday cake in our kitchen and told me I was sensitive when I noticed things they wanted hidden. Then the accusation came out. I was responsible for throwing away my life by cleaning offices. For a second, I thought I had heard wrong. I waited for the correction. I waited for someone to laugh nervously and say that was not what they meant. Nobody did. Adrian lowered their eyes at exactly the right moment. It was a beautiful performance if you did not know where to look. One trembling breath, one wounded glance, one sentence about never wanting to believe family could do something like that. I said no. I said it clearly. I said it before anyone could interrupt me. But the room reacted like denial was part of the script. My father asked why there were questions around my name. My mother asked why I was making this harder. Someone near the doorway whispered that guilty people always got defensive. That was when I realized truth was not the thing being weighed. Convenience was. The convenient version was simple. I had done it. The painful version required looking at Adrian, and nobody wanted to do that. I tried to explain the timeline. I tried to show messages. I asked for dates, receipts, anything concrete. Every question made them angrier because questions have a way of disturbing people who only prepared accusations. My family used my work uniform as a punchline for years, never noticing I was learning how the building ran while saving every dollar to buy into it. The lie did not stay inside the family. Lies never do when they make good gossip. By the end of the week, people I barely knew were speaking to me softly at the grocery store, as if I had confessed to something sad and unforgivable. I lost invitations first, then I lost ordinary warmth. Cousins stopped replying. An aunt who used to send me recipes blocked me after writing that I should be ashamed. Even the neutral relatives acted like neutrality meant standing 10 feet away from me in public. I kept a folder on my kitchen table. It started with 3 pieces of paper and turned into a heavy stack: bank records, phone logs, appointment notes, emails, visitor sheets, copies of anything that proved I had been exactly where I said I was. Some nights I opened that folder just to remind myself I was not losing my mind. Other nights I hated it because paper could prove facts, but it could not make people love you fairly. The hardest part was remembering Mr. Vale. Mr. Vale had been the one person who made me feel like the story of my life did not have to be approved by the loudest people in the room. When everyone else wanted performance, Mr. Vale noticed small things: a changed tone, a missing receipt, a person who smiled too quickly after hurting someone. That kind of noticing became the thread I held onto. I stopped trying to win arguments over dinner. I stopped replying to group messages designed to bait me into sounding unstable. I started answering only in writing: dates, times, calm sentences, no pleading. My family hated that even more. They wanted the version of me who broke down. They wanted me emotional enough to dismiss. When I became quiet, they called it arrogance. When I became organized, they called it obsession. Meanwhile, Adrian grew comfortable. That was the mistake. People who are protected for too long begin to believe protection is the same thing as innocence. They get lazy with details. They repeat the lie so often that they forget the first version. They assume nobody is watching the edges. But the truth was sitting in the edges the whole time. The day everything broke open began like a punishment. I walked into a glass office tower downtown and felt every head turn. The room had the stale warmth of coffee, flowers, and people pretending not to stare. I had almost stayed home. I stood in my bedroom that morning holding 2 different shirts and thinking that no outfit could protect me from walking into a room where people had already decided what my face meant. Then I remembered how many times I had stayed away to make things easier for them, and how each absence had been used as proof that I had something to hide. So I went. Adrian was near the front, accepting sympathy like it belonged to them. My parents hovered close, proud and exhausted and afraid of anything that might disturb the version they had rehearsed. I sat near the aisle, not hidden, not centered, just present. For a while, nothing happened. People murmured. Chairs scraped. Someone touched my shoulder with the kind of pity that feels more like accusation than comfort. Then the thing nobody planned for happened. They arrived for Adrian's legal networking event and found me unlocking the private elevator to the top floor suite I owned. At first, the room did not understand what it was seeing. People are slow to recognize truth when it arrives without asking permission. Someone leaned forward. Someone else said, "Wait." The sound moved through the room in a ripple, not loud yet, but sharp enough to change the air. I saw Adrian's face before anyone spoke. That was how I knew. The color drained first, then the mouth tightened, then the eyes began searching for an exit that did not exist. My father asked what we were looking at. He said it in his authority voice, the one that usually made everyone straighten up. This time, nobody straightened. They were too busy staring. I stood because my legs were shaking and I did not want to shake sitting down. "Pause it," I said. The room went still. Whoever controlled the screen froze the image. The evidence was not dramatic in the way movies make evidence dramatic. There was no thunderclap, no confession, no villain rising from a chair. There was just one ordinary detail that had been there the entire time. The ownership plaque in the lobby listing my holding company as the buyer of the top floor. Adrian tried to speak. The first sentence came out wrong. The second contradicted the first. By the third, even the relatives who had defended them started looking at the floor. I did not shout. I had imagined shouting for months. I had imagined saying every sentence I swallowed, naming every insult, every door closed in my face, every message left unanswered. But when the moment came, I felt strangely calm. "That is what I kept asking you to check," I said. "That is what you called drama?" No one answered. What followed was not one clean apology. It was messier and uglier than that. People asked questions they should have asked months earlier. People demanded explanations from Adrian as if they had not helped build the wall that protected the lie. Adrian tried to laugh it off in front of his firm partners, but the building manager handed me the leasing folder and asked whether I wanted to renew their space. My mother cried first. I thought seeing her cry would soften me, but it only made me tired. She kept saying she did not know. I believed that. I also knew not knowing had been a choice she defended every time I asked her to look. My father said my name like it was a door he expected to open. "Lena," he said, "we need to talk." Those 5 words used to pull me across any distance. I used to want nothing more than to be invited back into the room where the family decided who mattered. This time I looked at him and saw a man who wanted to discuss consequences only after consequences had found the right person. "We can talk in writing," I said. He flinched. "Good." Adrian began to cry then, real tears or useful ones I could not tell anymore. They said they were scared. They said things had gone too far. They said they never meant for everyone to turn on me. That last part almost made me laugh. People who start fires always act surprised by smoke. "You meant enough," I said. After that, the room broke into smaller rooms. Relatives gathered in corners. Phones came out. The family story began rewriting itself in real time, everyone trying to place themselves on the right side of the truth now that the truth was visible. A cousin who had ignored me for months touched my arm and whispered that she had always felt something was off. I stepped back before she could hug me. "You should have said that when it mattered," I told her. Her face crumpled, but I did not take care of it for her. That was the strangest freedom of the whole day, realizing I did not have to comfort people through the guilt of mistreating me. The official consequences came later. Documents were requested. Statements were written. People who had dismissed my folder suddenly wanted copies of everything inside it. I gave the records to the people who needed them and nothing more. The first person to text me afterward was not one of the people who had hurt me the worst. It was one of the people who had watched. That almost felt worse. She wrote 3 long paragraphs about how complicated everything had been, how emotions had been high, how nobody had wanted to choose sides. I read the message twice while standing at my kitchen counter with a glass of water I had forgotten to drink. Nobody wanted to choose sides. That sentence sat in my chest like a stone because it was the neatest lie people tell themselves after they choose the easier side. They had chosen comfort. They had chosen access. They had chosen the person who made the story easier to repeat at dinner. They had just not chosen me. I did not reply that night. Instead, I opened the folder again and laid the pages across my table. Not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because I wanted to see the distance between what had happened and what everyone had decided happened. There was the first date connected to throwing away my life by cleaning offices. There was the first message I had sent asking for details. There was the first time Adrian changed the story. There was the first silence from my parents. The pattern looked obvious once I saw it all together. That made me angry in a new way, not loud anger, clean anger, the kind that finally knows where to stand. For weeks after the truth came out, my family tried to rush me into a reunion because they were uncomfortable living in the pause between exposure and forgiveness. My mother called from numbers I did not recognize. My father sent short, formal messages that sounded like business memos drafted by guilt. Aunt sent old photos, as if a picture of a birthday cake from 15 years ago could erase the months they spent making me feel dangerous. Adrian sent nothing at first. That silence told me more than any apology could have. They were waiting to see how bad the consequences would be before deciding how sorry to sound. The family group chat, which had been used so efficiently to shame me, suddenly became quiet. Then a new thread appeared without me in it. I only knew because a cousin accidentally sent me a message meant for someone else. Do we know what she wants? It said. She, not my name, not an apology, a negotiation. I stared at that sentence for a long time, and then I did something I had never done before. I answered exactly what I meant. I want the truth said as loudly as the lie was. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again. No one replied. That was how I learned they were not afraid of hurting me. They were afraid of being seen hurting me. A few days later, my father asked me to meet him in a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and the old family neighborhood. I almost said no. Then I decided I wanted to see whether he had learned to speak without an audience. He looked smaller when he walked in. Not physically, exactly. He still wore the same pressed shirt, the same watch, the same controlled expression. But the certainty around him had thinned. He sat across from me and placed both hands around his coffee cup without drinking. Your mother is devastated, he said. I waited. He cleared his throat. We all are. That is not an apology, I said. His eyes lifted to mine, startled, as if the adult version of me had walked in without permission. I know, he said, but the words sounded borrowed. I did not fill the silence for him. I had spent my whole life rescuing my parents from uncomfortable silence. If my father paused too long, I softened the room. If my mother cried, I handed her a reason to forgive herself. If someone hurt me, I explained it in a way that made them less cruel. That habit died slowly. It twitched in me even then, but I let the silence stay. Finally, he said, we believed Adrian because it was easier. It was the first honest thing anyone had said. I felt my throat tighten, but I did not cry. I had cried alone too many times to perform it for him now. I know, I said. I should have checked. Yes, I should have listened to you. Yes, he looked down at the table. I do not know how to fix this. That was the sentence I had been afraid of because a younger version of me would have rushed to help him. I would have made a list. I would have said it was okay. I would have made my pain manageable so he could feel like a good father again. Instead, I said, you start by telling everyone exactly what you did wrong. He looked pained. I let him look pained. The next week, a message went out to the family. It was not perfect. It was stiff and embarrassed and clearly edited several times, but it said I had been falsely accused. It said the evidence had been ignored. It said the family owed me an apology. For 10 minutes after it arrived, I felt nothing. And I put my phone down and cried so hard I had to sit on the kitchen floor. It was not relief exactly. Relief feels lighter than that. This felt like my body finally understanding it could stop holding up the ceiling. The apologies came in waves after that. Some were clumsy, some were selfish. Some were just people trying to get out from under their own shame as fast as possible. One uncle wrote, I hope we can move forward. I wrote back, moving forward requires saying what happened. He did not respond. Another cousin sent a voice note crying about how she had missed me. I listened to it once and heard the old trap inside the tears. If I comforted her, she would feel forgiven. If I did not, I would become cold again. I deleted it. Not because I hated her. Because I was done proving my softness to people who had used it as an entrance. The practical side of the fallout kept moving too. There were meetings, forms, calls, and the slow grind of institutions finally taking seriously what I had been saying from the beginning. Every time someone official asked for my version, I felt the old panic rise. Then I remembered the ownership plaque in the lobby listing my holding company as the buyer of the top floor and breathed through it. The truth had evidence now. It did not have to survive on my voice alone. Adrian finally asked to meet after the consequences became impossible to dodge. They chose a public park, probably because they thought I would be less direct under open sky. I went because I wanted to see the face of the person who had watched my life narrow around their lie. They were sitting on a bench when I arrived, shoulders hunched, sunglasses on though the day was cloudy. I messed up, they said. It was such a small phrase for such a large wreckage that I almost turned around. You did not mess up, I said. You made choices. Their mouth tightened. I was scared. Of being caught. Of losing everything. So you handed that loss to me. The conversation went in circles after that. They wanted me to understand the pressure they were under. They wanted me to know they had not expected it to get so big. They wanted to be seen as a desperate person who made a mistake, not a cruel person who made a plan. Maybe they were desperate. Maybe they did feel cornered. Maybe some part of them had convinced itself that I would survive the blame because I had always been the stronger one. But being strong is not consent to be used. I told them that. For the first time, they had no answer. That night, I drove past the neighborhood where I grew up. I did not plan to. My hands just took the familiar roads, past the pharmacy, the bakery, the corner where the streetlights always flickered in winter. The house looked the same from outside, warm windows, trimmed hedges, a porch light my mother always forgot to turn off until morning. For years I thought being outside that house meant being outside my own life. Now I sat in my parked car and felt something loosen. A house is not a family is not a verdict, and a verdict once overturned does not require you to return to the courtroom. I drove home. Home was quieter, smaller, mine. Over the next month, I began taking back ordinary things. I went to the grocery store without wondering who had heard what. I answered my phone only when I wanted to. I stopped drafting explanations in my head before every family event because I stopped attending events where my presence was treated like a test. I also started telling the truth without dressing it up. When someone asked if things were better with my family, I said, "They are more honest now." That answer made people uncomfortable, but it was accurate. Better is not always the first gift truth gives you. Sometimes the first gift is clarity. Sometimes clarity looks like an empty chair at a holiday table and a peaceful evening in your own kitchen. The strangest messages came from people who had only known the false story. They said they were sorry for believing what they heard. I appreciated some of them. Others felt like people apologizing to protect their image of themselves is fair. I learned to accept an apology without offering closeness in return. That was new for me. Before, I thought forgiveness had to be visible to count. A hug, a dinner, a smiling photo so everyone could relax. Now I understood that forgiveness, if it came at all, could be private. It could be the decision to stop rehearsing the argument when I brushed my teeth. It could be sleeping through the night. It could be letting a name appear on my phone without my stomach dropping. Trust was different. Trust would require time, repetition, humility, and the kind of honesty my family had avoided for years. I was no longer giving it away as a family discount. There was one final family dinner I agreed to attend, not because I wanted reconciliation that night, but because I wanted to see what they did when they could no longer pretend I had misunderstood them. I chose a seat near the end of the table. That tiny choice unsettled everyone. For years, I had taken the seat nearest the kitchen so I could help carry plates, refill glasses, smooth over tension, and disappear when the conversation sharpened. This time, I sat where I could see every face. My mother had cooked too much food. She always did that when words failed her. Serving dishes crowded the table, roasted vegetables, chicken, bread, a salad nobody touched. The old version of me would have complimented everything immediately, offering her a bridge so she would not have to build one herself. I waited. My father unfolded a napkin with ceremonial care. Someone coughed. A fork tapped a plate once and stopped. "We are glad you came," my mother said. "I am here to listen," I said. That changed the temperature in the room. They had expected me to arrive grateful for an invitation back. They had not expected me to arrive with boundaries already seated beside me. For the first few minutes, everyone performed normal life. A cousin mentioned traffic. Someone asked about a neighbor's new fence. My father started to talk about work before catching himself, as if even he understood that small talk could not cover what had happened. Then my mother put down her fork. "I was wrong," she said. The sentence came out thin, but it came out. I looked at her, not softly, not cruelly, just directly. "What were you wrong about?" Her eyes filled instantly. In the past, tears would have ended the conversation. They would have turned her into the wounded person and me into the person responsible for fixing the wound. This time, nobody moved. She swallowed. "I was wrong to believe the worst about you." And my aunt shifted in her chair. My father looked at the table. My mother pressed a napkin under one eye. "I was wrong to tell people before I knew. I was wrong to ignore what you sent me. I was wrong to let everyone treat you like you had already been convicted." The words were not enough to heal me, but they were specific enough to matter. My father spoke next. His voice was lower than usual. "I cared more about ending the embarrassment than finding the truth," he said. That one landed hard, because it was exactly what had happened. My pain had embarrassed them. My insistence had embarrassed them. The possibility that the family might be wrong had embarrassed them, so they had chosen the story that let them feel in control. "Thank you for saying that," I said. He looked almost relieved, which told me he had expected either forgiveness or fury and did not know what to do with dignity. Adrian was not at that dinner. Their absence sat in the room like another place setting. Nobody said the name at first. Then I did. What happens with Adrian is not mine to manage. My father nodded too quickly. "I mean it," I said. "Do not ask me to help soften consequences. Do not ask me to meet so everyone can feel better. Do not tell me that carrying anger will poison me. I carried your suspicion for months. I know the difference between poison and memory." Nobody argued. That silence was the closest thing to respect I had heard from them in a long time. Dinner did not become warm after that. It became honest, which was better. Warmth can be faked with candles and old stories. Honesty makes people choose each sentence carefully. When I left, my mother followed me to the porch. The night air smelled like rain on concrete. She wrapped her cardigan tight around herself and stood beside me without touching my arm. "Will you come again?" she asked. I looked at the house, at the lit windows, at the doorway I had once mistaken for safety. "Maybe," I said, "but not because you ask once, because things stay different." She nodded, and for once she did not ask me to promise comfort I could not give. On the drive home, I did not cry. I did not shake. I did not rehearse what I should have said. The night moved past my windshield in clean, dark strips, and I realized I was not waiting for anyone in that house to decide who I was anymore. That was the real ending, not the evidence, not the confrontation, not even the apologies. The real ending was the morning I woke up and understood that my name belonged to me again. My family wanted a private meeting. I declined. They wanted to apologize in person. I told them written apologies would be easier to remember accurately. They hated that sentence because accuracy had become dangerous to them. I renewed the lease because I was not petty enough to destroy his career, then raised the rent to market value because I was done discounting myself. What I learned is that being clear does not rewind the damage. It does not give you back the months you spent checking your own memory because everyone around you sounded so certain. It does not erase the look on a parent's face when they chose suspicion over love. It does not make betrayal smaller just because other people finally agree it happened. But it gives you ground. For a long time, I thought I needed my family to say they believed me before I could breathe again. I was wrong. I needed the truth to exist outside my body. I needed one undeniable thing in the world to say I had not invented my own innocence. Once I had that, I stopped begging. Some relatives still try to reach me through soft messages. They say the family is healing. They say everyone made mistakes. They say life is short. I do not argue with any of that. I just remember that life was short when they were wasting mine. So when people ask whether I forgave Adrian, I tell them forgiveness is not the same as returning to the scene of the crime and helping sweep the floor. I am not angry every day anymore. That is its own kind of mercy. I have built routines that do not require bracing for a phone call. I have friends who ask questions before forming verdicts. I have a home where documents are for bills and recipes, not survival. And sometimes, when doubt tries to creep back in, I think about that single overlooked detail. One reflection, one box, one ledger, one letter, one line in a contract, one frame of footage, one thing nobody noticed because they were too busy watching me. They thought the truth needed a defender. It turned out the truth only needed a pause button.